What's going on, everybody? Dude here. Hope everything is going okay for you. Today, we're going to have a very interesting conversation about a very sad topic, a very, very awful topic to discuss. That's the subject of parental alienation. And in this, I'm doing a series on narcissism as a network. And I'm going to try to help you understand that parental alienation is a result of when the entire network attacks your child. Yep. The entire network targets your child and throws your child into the Truman Show. Everyone around the child lies to the child about you. I mean, everyone. The the holy grail for the narc would be to unalive your child. I mean, to unalive your child would give them enough energy to siphon from your child's loss of prosperity, loss of healthiness, all the things that your child loses out on. The narcissist gain as a fuel energy source. It's like they feed off of your child's future. You can better understand it as more of like a demonic type of feeding, where they suck the vitality out of your child and leave your child helpless to pull away from the magnitude of them, because they control so much of the child's mind. The child is basically thrown into the Truman Show, where all the adults around you who are in on it practically all agree to say the same lie. And that is that you're crazy and you're morally deficient. Whatever the specific lie is going to be, is going to drill down to the fact that they're telling your child that you are morally deficient. And the second thing is that they demand loyalty to them as a group. So they set the entire stage to force the child to basically take a knife and sever their own arm off, including blood and tendons, while they watch and blame the other parent. This is a brutal and demonic process whereby their sense of self is completely destroyed by the alienating parent in full cooperation with all the adults around you and the child. Parental alienation couldn't happen if somebody spoke up for you and said, hey, child, hey. It couldn't happen. It only happens when when these sick people surround your child and all say the same narrative about you that they created out of thin air. And when they have your child enmeshed within their reality, they then trap the child in their reality by alienating the child from everyone who would have a different opinion other than themselves. These narcissistic families are like cults, and they capture the person and they control their minds. They control their minds by destroying their internal sense of self. And when the child doesn't have their internal sense of self, they only have their external ego, which is their super ego, which are the people around them. That's why they always have to alienate the child from other voices. This is the one of the most awful things that you could ever do to a human being is to force them to choose between a parent. And in this case, in parental alienation, they are required to wholly reject the parent at all levels. It has to be an absolute rejection. And this is like telling to a child, someone you love, okay, you love mommy, so that means daddy's a bad guy. So that means that you have to never see daddy again. And the only parent who would say anything like that would have to be the narcissistic, sociopathic, antisocial parent, particularly the narcissist. Parental alienation is a narcissistic attack upon the parent with empathy, the legitimate parent. And it's a sadistic and very brutal form of brainwashing whereby the child's internal sense of self is purposefully destroyed by the narcissistic parent. And the child is made wholly dependent upon the reflection of the psychopathic parent. That's why they must return to that alienating parent as soon as possible because they're victims too. Let me tell you how. When we're born, there's two parts to your ego, basically an internal portion, which is an internal sense of self, and an external component, which is basically all the people around you, like your culture, your family, your church, your school, your teachers, law enforcement. All of these things around you make up what's called your super ego, or it's called the external component of your ego. So what the sociopathic narcissistic parent does is destroy their child's internal sense of self so that the child is wholly reliant upon the external ego, meaning in order for the child to feel whole, they have to be pleasing the person who harmed them. Understand how sick that is, and understand what's happening when someone does this to a young person on purpose. When the narcissistic parent damaged the child's sense of self on purpose so that the child is wholly dependent upon them, that is wholly evil. And this is happening to how many of us? Think about this. In the Black community, how many the rate of single parenthood, and traditionally look how the African American father has always been described, like as if he's abandoned his family. But no one have empathized or actually told the stories of what it was like for Black men going through these periods of times when they've betrayed as such a betrayal to their own families. That portrayal is awful. It's awful. And that forms the external ego for many of us young men coming up. It's awful. And it's a delusion. It doesn't represent the majority of interactions that African American men have with their families. It doesn't. So parental alienation is a brutal, sadistic process where the narcissistic family overcome the psychological functioning and well-being of the person, and therefore the person experiences a death. They are no longer themselves. In essence, they become a mirror for the narcissist. And then this brutal sadistic process, the person is basically unalived and appears as a drone or as a puppet that's being controlled by someone else. And so they want to do this because the child becomes the vehicle or the mirror for the alienating narcissist to project their anger and their hostility towards the loving parent. This is, and who would think that these sick people understand how to set something like this up? You understand what I'm saying? I'm saying, listen, when you're in front of that narcissist, you have to be very careful because narcissists in themselves are coward. They wouldn't be in front of you unless they had their backup ready. And remember, that narcissist in front of you was unalived a long time ago. So you're dealing with a higher narc that's viewing you through them. Why? Because wherever you say and do, they're going to go back and tell this person absolutely everything. And then they're going to give them their instruction. When they come back in front of you again, there's going to be a round two. It's just not a random interaction between you two. There's a whole collection of information processing things, reconfiguration, replanning that happens in the background when you're not there. It's a whole planning headquarters they have where they plan and revise things. These people are sick. And you can imagine what happens when you're not around. Everything they do in order to keep themselves hidden while they plot and plan to destroy things in your life, remain in the background and remain hidden. These people are sick. If you don't believe that these people invest time and energy in plotting and planning to make your life difficult, to destroy your life, you're a fool. You better wake up now. You better wake up right away. Parental alienation, and then because the child is wholly dependent upon the narcissistic family, they're going to always act in a way that tries to win favoritism from the narcissistic family because they don't want to have to deal with the torture that's going to come if they do not please the narcissist. So when you are a victim of parental alienation, the child appears to be loving towards the narcissistic alienating parent and hostile and angry towards the loving and caring parent. These people are so sick, they reverse reality from you. They're so sick, they reverse reality. And you begin to see all the trauma that the child is coming through that's really being imposed by the narcissistic parent, but it's only being expressed outwardly in the environments that you're in. So it seems as if you're the one that's creating the disturbances because you're the safest space for the explosion to happen. These children have been tortured psychologically and emotionally, and they have to hold it in front of the person, the sick, sadistic, awful person who's abusing this child. They have to hold it in, but they can only explode at the weakest link, meaning the most loving parent, the one who would be the most flexible, the one who would be most adaptable. And you, the loving parent, understand that these hostile and aggressive reactions by their children who have been alienated against them is a reaction to trauma. And so these parents have a tendency to look at it with more empathy. And so it becomes the focal point to complain about this loving parent. Oh, the patient, he's always like this over their house. Look at they can get along with this. They couldn't do this. This is what they're saying. This is what they're saying. When actually the sadistic parents is producing these interactions through the child because the child has been effectively unalived and is serving only as a vehicle for this narc. And the narc is actually targeting you by proxy. Parental alienation is emotional and psychological and domestic violence by proxy through the kids. That's what parental alienation is. These children, if you are dealing with this as a parent, it's important that you get the right help right away. If it's parental alienation, you need to, because they're going to get you to those sick therapists who are going to agree with them. the sick psychiatrists who are going to write your diagnosis down, you better not talk to anybody in their camp because they're going to try to write that you're crazy or try to get some narrative against you that you're crazy. You have to make sure you get the right healthcare providers that understand what parental alienation is. Because when that child blames you for everything and then idealizes the mother, you're going to have some explaining to do, right? And that explaining is you need to make sure that who's evaluating you or assessing your situation really understand what that means. For someone with a lot of experience with parental alienation and working as a psychiatrist with these sick narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths, I understand that when the child clings to the parents, that's the one. That's the one. No child should be clinging to the parent like that. They should be fighting against the parent. They need autonomy, right? They're going to fight against the parent that sets limits, not be compliant with them and not happy to see them. Only children who've been groomed and forced to behave that way behave that way. So it's very interesting. So I have chat GCP, whatever here. Let me see here. Okay, let me see. Chat GTP. Okay. Okay, what I'm looking for. Okay, let me do a new. Okay, let me do a new chat. Okay. Explain parental alienation. Okay, let's see here. Parental alienation refers to a psychological and relational process in which one parent, often called the alienating parent, manipulates, influences, or pressures a child to reject or distance themselves from the other parent, the targeted parent, without legitimate justification such as abuse or neglect. Right. And so this is this targeting. The alienating parent is using the child to target the other parent. It is not an official diagnosis, DSM-5, but is widely recognized in psychology, family law, and child custody as a pattern of emotional manipulation that can severely damage a child relationship with one parent and their long-term mental health. This impact. I mean, how many families in the what percentage of families in the United States that this actually impact? A huge percentage. I mean, a huge percentage inside of this. Unfortunately, in the custody laws and everything, the person who receives the kid typically gets the rewards, and the other. I think we've grown up. I think we've grown up as a society. I think that we should remove children out of the what you call them burden, and the issue should be the money goes to the kids, and then the money goes to the kids. Just the money goes. Has anybody ever thought about that? And custody fees, basically the money goes to the kids, and then the kids pay the family, whatever it is, everything. I don't know. Let me get off that though. Okay. Okay. Core features: unjustified rejection. The child begins to strongly resist or refuse contact with one parent for reasons that are exaggerated or entirely unfounded. Okay, influenced by the other parent. The alienated parent may consciously or unconsciously engage in behaviors that turn the child against the other parent. Yeah, distortion of reality. The child often adopts the alienated parent's perspective as their own and may insist that their rejection is self-motivated, not influenced. Yeah, Yeah, see, they see narcissists are sick. I mean, if you have a child with a narcissist, you need to get the appropriate help. You're going to have to make sure that you get some help because when they start, they're going to go for those children, and when they try to damage those children are going to be damaged for everybody, not just for you, for everybody, right? When they damage that internal sense of self of their own child by the gaslighting, by the lying, by the feeding their brain with false information, by restricting other people's access to other opinions, by restricting their access to certain environments and things like that. When they start doing that and everything, of course, the person's going to have a significant distortion in their reality, and then that'll make them wholly depend upon them, right? It's awful. Okay, common behaviors um, of alienated parents. Speaking negatively about the other parent in front of the child. Yep. Limiting or interfering with contact or communication between the child and the other parenting. Yep. Limiting or interfering with contract. Yep. Withholding information from the other parent. Yep. Encouraging a child to view the other parent as unsafe, unworthy, unloving, or unworthy. Yep. Rewarding the child's rejection or anger through anger towards the other parent. Yeah, yeah. All of these tactics and basically targeting the bond that the parents have with to have with each other. Typical child reaction: unwavering hostility towards the targeted parent, even when previously there was a good relationship. Look, see, this is unwavering hostility, right? That's the characteristics. And then many of these kids are so traumatized, they'll be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, indefinite oppositional defiant disorder. Here, lack of ambivalence, see one parent as all good and the other as all bad. Borrowed language, the child uses adult like arguments that sound rehearsed. Yeah. Yep. Absence of guilt about mistreating or rejecting a target parent. Yeah, no guilt at all. Yeah. So when you start to see your child having all of these symptoms, is they basically been unalived, right? So basically, who they really are has been damaged so much that it's receded, and now they're just dependent upon the environment around them to stabilize their mood, their anxiety, their emotions, their cognitive functioning. And so they are wholly dependent on people around them, so they have to please the people around them. So you start to see them behave in ways that basically fit into groups or fit into organizational structures. They can play a role, and if they play a role, they can please people. And if they get the right signals, that approval, then their mood is stable, their anxiety is stable. Then if everything is going well at work, then I'm fine. If it's not going well at work, then I'm not fine, right? That's what I'm talking about. Um, let's say psychological impact. Um, um, Psychological impact: long-term identity confusion and trust issues. Long-term identity confusion and trust issue. Yeah, yeah. The let me go back to the typical child reactions. All of these symptoms of unwavering hostility, the lack of ambivalence, the borrowed language, and the absence of guilt, all of these things are sort of symptoms that the child has been unalived, right? That they've damaged their internal sense of self so much that there's no more, that person who they really are is sort of trapped inside their subconscious so much that they don't get a chance to express themselves outwardly anymore, right? What you see is nothing but the ego and its desperate need to balance itself, to make itself feel normal. So the only way the ego can do this is look outward. And when it gets reactions from the environment, then the ego can then assess whether it's good or it's bad. So if things in the environment is pleasing to the ego, like a lot of people looking welcoming, then the ego say, hey, I'm feeling good today. If the ego runs into an environment where everybody's looking at him, and saying, we want to kill you, then ego is saying, I'm not doing well today. So the ego is how you feel and how you perceive things is basically dependent wholly upon the people and the things you're around. So that's why at that point they have to limit your contact with other people. Where the victims of parental alienations, they have their limitations. The number of people who they can talk to is limited. Where they can go is limited. Their behavior is very controlled because they have to limit other people's access to introducing new ideas into their brain. Right? Okay. Next, the psychological impact, long-term identity confusion, because you're living a life when that narcissistic parent intentionally destroys their child's sense of self. They're intentionally damaging their child and setting them up to be the perfect prey for themselves as narcissists and the other narcissists that will follow. When this person reaches adulthood and finally decides to pull away, they'll have to pull away and face a tremendous amount of rejection and hard and very difficult feelings because they no longer have the external reflection that helps them feel safe or help them feel normal or help them feel balanced. So what do they have to do? They have to go out and find one, because the emotional turmoil that goes from leaving a sick family structure of a narcissist to you by yourself may be too psychologically overwhelming because there's no one there. So there's no way to help prevent the depression, the anxiety, and to prevent everything from crushing in. It's very hard to prevent those things. So what do? They get into another relationship and find someone else who can now serve as that external mirror. And what will they likely do? Fall into what? Another narcissist. Why? Because the narcissist can easily pick them up. Why? Because the narcissist is going to see that they're wholly dependent upon their external ego, meaning they're wholly dependent upon approval from the people around them. And do you see why when the narc enters your life, they have to start a honeymoon right away? Because they understand you're dealing with alienation. Why? Because you're seeking external approval. Well, why are you seeking external approval? Because someone destroyed your internal sense of self. So they know they have to rush in there and try to identify with you, try to help you release your harm, try to be of service, be of pain, learn as much as they can. But they're only doing surveillance. When they surveyed enough, then they withdraw and leave you there testing to see if you're going to collapse. If you don't collapse, then they already have the evidence they can use against you. They can target you to force you to collapse. Everything they use when they engage with you will be used against you in some way. There's no way that they're not going to engage with you without recording you. There's no way these narcissists are going to engage with you without collecting any information about you. It seems as if they are fanatical about collecting things, sort of like an accountant collects every penny. I mean, everything that can and will be used against you, they're recording, and they will use it against you, particularly in parental alienation. Every situation, they're going to try to record those bad moments, and they're going to try and make it seem as you're the one who's crazy. And you know what? When they go to the doctor, don't go to that doctor. Why? They've already set things up for you, right? If you're going to go to the doctor, then make sure you bring at least 2 people with you, not 1, but 2 people. Why? Because you need 2 other witnesses. Why? Because if it's just you and that doctor, then whatever they say, that will be the truth. If you bring two people with you, then each one of you take notes. And I've always said this: if you never break any privacy laws, but if you're not recording a narc, I don't know what you're doing because they're recording you. And I don't think you ever want to be in a situation when a narc is targeting you, or and you don't have your own set of information, your own data to assess the situation with. These people ain't playing. These people are sick. You know. Now, if you are dealing with parental alienation, you're dealing with a network. So they've all of the people are around you lying. And here's the strange thing: if no one in your family comes to your aid, they are a part of it also. Yep. Let me say that again. If you're dealing with parental alienation and no one in your family is speaking up about it, well, they're part of it also. Yeah. Yeah, they're part of it also. Let me see here. Legal and clinical context. Family courts sometimes consider parental alienation when determining custody or visiting arrangements. Mental health professionals may assess for alienating behaviors rather than diagnosing parental alienation syndrome. Okay. Treatment usually focuses on the reunification therapy, helping the child to rebuild trust and balance both views of the patients. Yeah. So if you're dealing with parental alienation, you're going to have to understand several things. Okay. You're dealing with terrorists basically, and it's not one person. It's the person who's controlling. Okay, you have a child with a narcissist, but then that person is not alive, right? That person was unalived by someone, probably his mother, or his father, but most likely his mother, right? So you are actually in a relationship with his mother, right? And she's the one that causes the shots. And she's the one that's benefiting from all the suffering you have because she's feeding from proxy. It's her energy that she's feeding off. And the reason why she unalived her child is to be able to get access to your energy. I think you should look at it that way. Now, the only way that she can do this, why, if you're by yourself, if you are always with one or two people who are, you say, hey, this is parental alienation. I'm going to need someone there with me because I need to make sure that you stay in your reality and you don't go in their reality. No matter what they do, don't respect, don't respond. Take care of the business, right? And always keep your two angels right there by your side. Never have conversations or engage with them by yourself. You will regret it. Never go to any of their psychologists or psychiatrists unless they understand about parental alienation. If they're going to, now when they get into the court system, the courts are unable to handle these type of disputes, and so there's no legal remedy for it. And the court system they don't really want to harm either side. And I think this stuff occurs so much that when these disruptive narcissists come in the courtroom now, I think they are sort of known for this type of disruptive behavior. And so I don't think that the courts will really create financial harm or damage or losses to the same extent that the narcissists believe that the court would. I think that if they see that they're trying to harm people, I think the courts make the adjustments, right? So if you are dealing with this, there's no reason for them to be cooperative, right? Hold on 1 second. All right, guys. Okay. Um, okay. So here. Okay. Um, let me ask you. How do how do narcissists brainwash their children to alienate the other parents? I want to see if they're going to go through the psychological mechanism. Okay, look, here, that's a very insightful and important question. And yes, narcissistic parents often use powerful psychological tactics to brainwash or manipulate their children into rejecting the other non narcissistic or other loving parent. This process is a common form of parental alienation driven by narcissistic personality traits like control, lack of empathy, and need for loyalty and admiration. Number one, psychological mechanisms of indoctrination through emotional manipulation. A narcissistic parent often controls the child's emotions and perceptions to shape how they see the other parents. They do this by creating fear or guilt. If you love your mom or dad, it hurts me. Rewarding loyalty. The child gets attention or praise for siding with the narcissist. Punish independence. If the child expresses affection for the other parent, they may face withdrawal, anger, or silent treatment. Over time, the child's associate safely approves the love. Over time, the child associates safety, approval, and love with only pleasing the narcissistic parent, and rejecting the other parent becomes part of the survival strategy. You see what I'm saying? This is awful. I mean, this is awful. Over time the child associates safety, approval, and love with pleasing the narcissistic parent, and rejecting the other parent becomes part of the survival strategy. The good parent versus bad parent narrative. The narcissistic parents cast themselves as the hero or victim, and the other parents as the victim, as a villain. They might say, your dad or mom doesn't really love you. They care only about themselves. If they love you, they'll get right there now, here now. You're just like me. We'll have to stick together. They, the constant emotional storytelling conditions the child to view reality through the narcissist lens. Yeah, the constant emotional storytelling conditions the child to view reality through the narcissist lens. And look, yeah, projection and triangulation. The narcissists project their own flaws into the other parent, blaming them for the things they do themselves. For example, if the narcissist is controlling or dishonest, they tell the child the other parent is controlling or dishonest. They use triangulation, pitting the child between the parent and forcing them to choose sides. The child fears losing the child, fearing loss of love or approval, often chooses the narcissist side and begins rejecting the other parent to maintain peace. Gaslighting and reality distortion. Narcissists frequently rewrite history and distort facts. Oh my God, don't they rewrite history? That never happened. You don't remember that. You just don't remember, right? Your other parent made you feel unsafe. When a child hears this repeatedly, especially in formative years, their ability to trust their own memory and perception erodes. Eventually, they internalize the narcissistic version of reality and generally believes the loving parent is the problem. Mm, 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 mm. This is awful. And these sick people, these are sick adults, are doing this to children on purpose. I don't think in our society, if you see this, you should not approve of this. If you see someone alienating another parent as an adult, you should not approve that if that's all. In 2025, there's no way you should approve or side with a parent that's alienating their child for another parent. Like if a child hasn't seen their father or parent in a long time, it's awful. These people need to, these people who are damaging children like this need to be called out. I mean, yeah. Look, enmeshment and identity fusion. The narcissist may make the child feel like an extension of themselves, not as a separate individual. This is known as enmeshment, and it leads the child to take on the narcissist's feelings and opinions of their own. Remember, I was saying that they serve as a mirror for them. Feel guilty for having independent thought or affection for the other parent, right? Because that's a different perspective. Believe their loyalty determines their worth. The child's developing identity becomes fused with the narcissistic parent. The child's developing identity becomes fused with the narcissistic parents, making alienation seems like their own choice, even though it's deeply programmed. These people are sick. These people are sick. These people are sick to do this to a child. I mean, these people are sick. Isolation and control. Finally, the narcissist often isolates the child from the other parent, interfering with communications, scheduling conflicts, the disrupt visitation, coaching the child to be cold or disrespectful during visits. Over time, the loving parent becomes a distant figure, not because of anything they did wrong, but because of constant emotional connections were systematically. Oh, look, over time, the loving parent becomes a distant figure, not because of anything they did wrong, but because contact and emotional connections were systematically sabotaged. Remember when I was saying systematically sabotage? Narcissism is a network. Impact on the child may develop anxiety, confusion, guilt, identity issues, struggle with trust and attachment, later experience grief or regret, and then basically they end up unaliving the child. This sick narcissistic process that they go through stage by stage relentlessly, where they destroy the child's internal sense of self, so that they're only dependent upon them, is a very abusive practice that should end right away. I mean, I think if you are dealing with this, I think that it's important to we're going to pretty soon, we're going to be launching our platform. I'll be launching my podcast, world first ever podcast clinic. In a podcast clinic, I'll be able to see you right after I finish my podcast. So if I'm running my podcast now, you can be doing your intake paperwork and do everything like that and do all your paperwork and do all your history. And then I'll just see you right after the podcast. So that's going to be my podcast clinic. In the podcast clinic, the podcast clinic I'm opening, we're going to be providing services for victims of parental alienations, for families and children who've been victimized about this. And it's most importantly, you're going to have to really focus on making sure that your family is safe from these things. And if you're dealing with this, and so on this series on parental alienation, I'm going to do a series on parental alienation. The first in a series, I'm going to look at, let's say, Tyrese. Okay, Tyrese went through several baby mothers where I think those cases seem to fit like parental alienation. Next, Tyrese went online crying about his daughter. Next, 50 Cent. Again, 50 Cent grew up in the rap game, was shot in the face, became a very successful multimillionaire rapper, and then his son took pictures with the son of the man who tried to kill him. So this parental alienation where 50 Cent's son is friends with the person he tried to kill him. Why? Mom. Right? That's another case of parental alienation. A third case I thought about Brian McKnight. Brian McKnight had a story where he didn't have a relationship with his children from his previous marriage, and now he is in another marriage with an Asian woman, and she has a child. And so he's moved on from that relationship because he does those family members, but he doesn't have any relationship with them. And then his wife, his ex-wife, wrote a book about him, and he sued her and apparently got $8 million for it. So Brian McKnight is another case, I think, of parental alienation. Let me see if I can think of Tyrese. If I can think of anyone else. Hmm. No, if I thought of anything else, then I'll do it. So I'm gonna do a series on on each one of those to sort of try to explain and try to explain parental alienation from that perspective. And so I think that's all I have for today, and I hope this is very helpful for you guys. So remember, in this series, narcissism is a network. Remember, if you're dealing with parental alienation, hey, you need to contact me and my team right away. We'll be able to put together the services you need to help yourself deal with this. Most importantly, get the assessments for you to be able to manage this and identify everything that's going on. You know, um, I hope this is helpful for you guys. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure. Take care, guys. Read out. Ciao, guys.